Welcome back to lecture 2, the second part, which will end my discussion and presentation of how managers can perform corporate management by influencing the governance mechanisms instead of only focusing on managing the organization. It is to take the upside down of corporate governance. If you think that, well, it's a lot of words, but there is not so much theory, well, that is because, frankly speaking, I've never read a scientific paper that discuss how to turn corporate governance upside down. And the most important concept I have in this presentation is interactive governance. That is a concept I found when I did a research project together with one of my colleagues, when we studied a corporation where there appeared a lot of interactive governance. So let's continue. And I will try now to share the screen. Here it is, I hope. We just finished in the first part to manage through interactive governance with the owners. There we were talking a little bit about auditors. So now let's go to the auditors. An important agent of the shareholders are the auditors. Auditors have access to internal privileged information of the corporation. And their function is to inspect the reported information created by the corporation and to make sure that it is on a reasonable level of accuracy and being trustworthy. So remember, auditors never can assure that the information is perfect. It is on a reasonable level of accuracy and being trustworthy. Auditors have therefore to be independent from the owners and the management, and to be really independent. They should not be able to influence at all. They are professionals. No one can influence them. They are like professors in business administration, in corporate governance, like me. No one could, well, you could try to influence me. I will be influenced if there is a reason to be influenced, but no one can put a pressure on me, for example, to teach a specific thing. You can be sure that I teach out of my knowledge and not because some big guy has told me to tell things in a certain way. Professors are independent because they are professionals. Auditors are independent because they are professional. But this does not imply that it's not possible to manage the audit. Studies have found that the level of independence of auditors could be influenced through making the audit firm consultants to the corporation. That is, to use the audit firm for non-audit service. It doesn't mean that the corporation employs or ask the auditor to do some consultancy, because well, I don't know the regulations of Ukraine, but normally auditors are not allowed to be consulting in a corporation. But the audit firm can do consultancy, so they can have an auditor that is doing the auditing, and then another part of the audit firm performs these non-audit services. It is, I admit, highly conspiracy thinking, but one can imagine that an auditor that realized that the audit firm can get more business from the corporation, for example, by offering education or legal help, then maybe the auditor could be a little bit more flexible when it concerns accounting, inspection, valuation of assets, and so on. While it is formally the owners that decide which audit firm to use for auditing, It is possible for the corporate managers to influence the choice of audit firm, and the managers can use the audit firm in non-audit service, thus creating liaisons, relationships to the audit firm, and the auditor can be productive for their interest. Indeed, in studies performed in Sweden, it has been found that audit quality varies among audit firms. Normally, it is assumed that the big four audit firms that are dominating in the world really have the highest audit quality. No, that is not true. Studies indicate that this is not always the case. Some studies have found that there is one specific audit firm, I will not tell you which one, because it's of no interest, that belong to the big four audit firms that tend to have lower audit quality, as we measure audit quality. That doesn't mean that they are bad. It's just that their audit quality is lower. While this could be interpreted as a reduced level of audit quality, it could also indicate that the firm has a more, one could say, customer-oriented perspective on auditing. If the audit firm has an understanding of the situation of the corporation, maybe it can be more flexible in their auditing action. It could also be the case, which of course all audit firm denies, that the corporate managers have an interest in which audit firm that is elected as the auditors of the corporation. If this is not the case, but auditors are truly independent, then a different tactics could be expected from the management point of view. Then a rational action could be to stress audit rotation, which implied that the risk of auditors fulfilling a conciliary function towards the owners will be reduced, since there will be less time to build a trust relationship between the owners and the auditors. That means audit rotation. Well, you have one auditor for, let's say, 5 years, and then you rotate. That means you get a new auditor. That is a new person which you have to create a relationship with. And that takes time to create a trust relationship. Of course, the managers have the interest to create this kind of trust relationship with the auditors. They don't have the interest that the owners create this relationship, but they would like to have this relationship. So if they get a good relationship with an auditor, then they don't want audit rotation. If the auditors get a good relationship with the owners, the managers would like to have audit rotation. Finally, studies have found that high audit costs constitute a signal of accountability towards the corporation and its management. Company managers could therefore have the interest to increase audit costs, not because they want more auditing performed in the corporation, but because the higher cost signals that it is a trustworthy corporation and the corporate managers are subject to high levels of accountability of auditing. So what I claim here is really that while it is impossible to, or at least it should be impossible to influence the auditors, it is possible to influence the auditing, and therefore it is possible to manage this part of the governance mechanism, the auditing. The next governance mechanism is maybe the governance mechanism that is considered to be the most important governance mechanism, but at least it's the mechanism that has received the most attention. Maybe the most important way to influence the board is through interactive governance, where the CEO and the top management team supply a lot of information to the board. And of course, it's managed information. It is information that is shaped under the information management idea, which means to give information that can induce the board to conduct preferred actions and decisions, and to give and then to give extensive information that create trust, since it shows that the CEO reveal much information, have nothing to hide, supports, and this much information could support the board's function of monitoring the CEO and makes the CEO accountable. It creates the impression that this is what they're doing. Indeed, it has been found in studies that there is a difference in how much information that is shared by the CEO and the top management team to the board. So this studies have shown that there is this kind of interactive governance. But what these studies have shown is more that if you have a board that is very focused on monitoring, then there will be a tendency for the CEO to give less information, not more information. Because strong monitoring, think about yourself. If you are assigned to do a work and there is one standing above you and looking at whatever you are doing, then you feel, well, depressed. You're really framed. You are on the full, some are controlling you. Then you have a tendency to cheat, to try to get away from this kind of monitoring. So more monitoring creates tendency of higher levels of cheating. Therefore, a lower level of monitoring could induce the CEO to give more information. But the CEO has also interest on its own to give much information, manage information, that is. Another part of the interactive governance towards the board is to try to influence the board to perform the service function. As I told you, there are 4 functions that the board can perform. One of these are service function. Another is monitoring. A third is the decision making, and a fourth is conflict resolution. But if it's possible for the CEO to stress the service function and to make that, for example, the interest of the chair of the board, trying to promote the chair to have a board that stress this service function, that function is an asset for the CEO. So it's good for the CEO to have a board that is performing a lot of service. It is neither monitoring nor incentivizing, and it's not shaping the actions of the CEO, but gives the CEO an opportunity to get more and better information. So it's really helpful. And if the board is focusing on service, then there will be less time for monitoring and the other functions, which could be very comfortable for the CEO. So it could reduce the monitoring efforts. To improve interactive governance possibilities, the CEO could try to influence the composition of the board. CEO could prefer what's called dependent directors. That are those directors that are dependent on the firm, on the CEO, on the top management team, or the dominant owner. In one case, where I performed a case study, I observed how a CEO in a family firm, the CEO was not of the family, was independent of the family, tried to include the younger family generation through promoting some of the young family generation to be included as directors of the board. It was not the owner, which was in this case the father of this young generation, that included them at the board. It was the CEO that performed these activities and got them included as members of the board. It indicated that it was the CEO, not the family owner, that had a structured strategy of nepotism, because this is nepotism, which is the basis of family firms, to promote people of the family and not because of some other kind of competencies. But this was a structured strategy of nepotism to think, how should we continue the family involvement in the family firm? In this case, it was performed with the interest to secure the firm as a family firm, since the CEO believed it would create certainty and stability for the firm and its employees. So the CEO did this action to include the children of the father in the board of directors, not because he wanted to support the children. No, he wanted to include them in order to secure that it is a family firm, because family firms are famous for being more secure firms, more stable firms. The CEO and the top management could try to support the highly fashionable actions of today, which is diversity. Heterogeneity of directors is a well-supported norm in society, in the books that you read about corporations, and in all teaching. Diversity is hailed. But with diversity follows the risk, or one could say in this case, the chance of increased conflicts and tensions at the board due to contrasting views and competencies, which will probably consume a lot of energy at the board meetings, which then will divert the attention from activities like monitoring. So normally when we say diversity, it's a norm that is highly ranked, but diversity also have a tendency to create conflicts and reduce efficiency in groups. But in this case, as a CEO, maybe you would like to have less efficiency in monitoring, so get more diversity, which also means that you then can present the corporation, oh, look at our board, it has a very high level of diversity, which is promotional for the corporation and promotional for the CEO, because there will be less monitoring. That is really debated in the research. There are studies that shows that increased diversity when it concerns inclusion of females increase the monitoring capacity, because females are more monitoring oriented. But other study shows there is no relationship, and the third section of studies shows the other way around. So it's well, at least today, we know that diversity can be promotional, but it also drives conflicts. Another composition question of the board is if the CEO should be included as a director with voting rights. The CEO could argue for its presence at the board as a board member with voting rights, since it will align the CEO with the will of the board. That sounds good. In reality, it will make the CEO more capable of influencing the board's decision-making, because not only does the CEO has a presence at the board meeting, it also has a voting right. So while it can be argued to be an instrument of alignment to have the CEO as a voting member of the board, it is also a power empowerment. In US, this double-edged sword is present, since most CEOs are voting members of the board. Indeed, very often also could be chair of the board. And several other members of the top management team are voting members of the board. That is a construction that in the eyes of a Swedish person, where it's illegal for a CEO to be a chair, appearing like it appears like corruption. In Sweden, the CEO cannot be the chair, and only one from the top management team, typically the CEO, can be a member. So there's a difference. Then we come to governance intelligence. Governance intelligence implies that the CEO and the top management team tries to find out where decisions are made and where discussions are being held, which precedes the decision of the board. Governance intelligence is to find out where are these arenas. Because studies have shown that board functions those functions that are presumably performed by a board are not always performed at the board meeting, but they are performed at other governance arenas. For example, in family firms, discussions and actual decision-making about, for example, an investment is performed at family gatherings, not at the board meeting. So being present at these family gatherings is therefore valuable, or at least to get information from these gatherings. We have in our studies found, for example, there was one case when the board of directors, the chair of the board of directors opened his newspaper and he read that a firm have made a decision to invest in a new business. And he was really surprised because that firm was the firm where he was chairing the board. And he had been on all the board meetings, and this issue had never been raised. It had never been discussed. It was a major strategic deviation of the corporation, and he got really angry. So he phoned one of these persons that have been presenting this strategy change for the newspaper. And he asked, what are you doing? I mean, this is a strategy change of the corporation, and it has to be the board of directors that make this decision. And this person, he said, oh, I'm sorry, it was me and my brother. We got carried away. We went I got this opportunity. I asked my brother to come to the cafe, and we sat at the cafe and we made a decision, and then we started the business, and then the newspaper got their hands on it, and that's how it went. I promise I will never do this again. I will always go to the board and ask the board. This was a family firm that was owned by three brothers. Two of these brothers were the ones that were meeting in this cafe. And of course, they thought that since we are the owners of the corporation, of course, we are the ones that make the decision of the what will happen. And this one brother, I should add, was also the CEO of the corporation. So they made the decision, and then finally they reported to the board, but the board got the information from mass media. And the chair of the board, he was, of course, irritated because this is a matter of, in order to really make this happen, it has to be decided by the board. But of course, at the board, the brothers have majority and they make the decision. So it's a kind of formality for them to have it on the board meeting, but not for the chair of the board. But this chair of the board was a very wise person. He said, please, don't do it again. And then he let it be. There was no sanctions against them. There was no mass media trouble when he went out saying that this is has not been decided at the board, so it's not really true. Because he was an employee of a corporation, where a family firm, where there was a very dynamic entrepreneur that really made all the decisions and then informed the board. So he was accustomed to this. And this is really this may be a little bit of deviation, but maybe this chair realized that if I make sanctions against these brothers, they will not try to perform good businesses. They will always think, oh, what will the board think about this? I have to go back and ask permission from the board. It will reduce their entrepreneurial activities. So, and that is the discretion of these people. So in order to keep the discretion, people have to be able to perform things that is a little bit out of the frames. As the founder of IKEA, Ingvar Kamprad, once said, I think it was like this, that at IKEA, we allow people to make mistakes, because if you don't make mistakes, then you tend to not make anything at all. And finally, if we go back to this, how to manage the board, it has been shown that in board compensation studies, that lower board budgets are correlated with weaker boards, since it will be hard to recruit the very best directors if you have a low board budget. Therefore, a CEO, a top management team, could try to promote a low budget to the board, which will reduce the capacity of the board to restrict the actions of the CEO and the top management team. Next is to manage through recruitment and promotion. This is the internal and external managerial labor market. As I said in the first lecture, recruitment is maybe one of the most important mechanisms, because if you recruit a perfect person that have just the same mindset as the main dominant owner, then there is nothing to govern, because that person will work. It will be identity twins. It will be as that person is the owner, and it will act as this owner. However, recruitment, except of the CEO, is in the hands of the CEO and the top management team. It's not in the hands of the owners. Since recruitment and promotion within the organization is a management decision, not a governance decision. I could imagine that, but I don't know, since we don't have studies where we convert this governance to management of governance, that internal labor market could be preferred by a CEO, because the CEO can influence who will be selected and how the socialization is performed. If socialization, that is, of people working in an organization being promoted to higher levels because they act in a way that is preferred, if socialization is performed in a perfect way, it will create very loose-knit management teams, characterized by brotherhood relationships, that means with high trust relationships, and where there is a loyalty towards those that have recruited the person. I mean, if you are working at a position and then someone is saying that, I believe in you, you are very good, I promote you to a higher position, that will tend to create a loyalty in you towards that person that has promoted you. And that loyalty can be used by this person in order to influence you in performing activities. So loyalty, if you have that, is a very low cost management control mechanism. With this mechanism of internal labor market and strong internal socialization, it is possible to have a higher level of diversity, both gender, ethnicity, and all these things, because everyone has the same mindset, but they are of different ethnic origin and different gender. That means that you get a higher level of control through socialization. You get a higher level of possibility to use the positive sides of diversity, that is development. And it also means that you can present for the environment that here in this corporation, we believe in diversity, which then means that you fulfill the expectations of the environment. So what really is an instrument to control could be presented as a very positive thing. So you have the group of managers constitute a clan, a brotherhood with non-congruence that is capable of exploiting the development part of diversity. The next mechanism, I don't think I have so much to to tell you about this mechanism because I haven't really found so many things to influence. That is to manage executive compensation. Executive compensation is, as I told you in lecture 1, is a mechanism that receives a lot of media and research attention. However, there is a low correlation between compensation and performance, so there is something strange going on. As I said, the reason could be that, well, compensation is indeed incentives to perform, but also maybe even more incentives to stay in the position. So compensation is more of a recruitment instrument than an incentive instrument, because compensation attracts and retains people that you would like to have in the organization, such as the CEO. Options are very popular instruments, and they are motivated as being incentivizing. Could you imagine yourself, if you have a wage at the top levels, you have a wage of many hryvnias. Now I don't know the exchange rate of hryvnias, but if we say as in terms of euros, if you have a salary each month, you get a salary of 100,000 euros. And if the CEO comes to you and say, well, I think that you're working good, but I would like you to work a little bit more harder. So if you promise to work a little bit harder, I will give you a raise to 120,000 euros. If you are on the top level of management, do you think there is one single person that would work harder if they get more money? Don't you think that they have been selected as hardworking people that really cannot change their habit of working, that they are always working on 100% capacity? They cannot imagine, and I cannot imagine, a top manager that reduce or increase its level of work intensity because of salary. That goes for options also, I think, because options is probably the instrument of keeping people at the position, not induce them to work harder, but induce them to stay. And then it's also, I think, an instrument that makes it possible to pay more to managers without people in the environment to see it, because options are normally exercised after the employment. So the money doesn't come when they are in the corporation. So maybe one could think that one could have, if you see that there are renegotiations appearing when the exercise price is less advantage for the CEO, then that indicates that options are recruitment arguments, not incentives. Because as a CEO, you would like to have an exercise price that is, when there is something in the option that is that will be fulfilled, so you can gain something. And if the prices of the shares are going down, then you would like to change the exercise price. So if there are these, as a CEO, you have the interest to have renegotiations of options, exercise price. And if that is the case in the corporation, that is an indication that it is a managed governance structure. Hi. Yes, I'm a little bit off here now. To manage strategy and structure. Strategy is a very powerful governance mechanism. One means for the CEO to manage the strategy is to use what is called emergent strategies. That's excellent. Emergent strategies are actions that are not really part of the strategy, but only represent small diversions from the strategy. It's our actions that are performed, really not important, that slowly develop over time into a business of its own and becomes therefore part of the strategy. It are small diversions from the strategy. It could be a small investment in some opportunity, seldom reported in reports and to the board, but slowly grows and grows and grows and grows, and then at one point in time becomes so big that it has to be included in a formal strategy. It has become a fait accompli. So emergent strategies could be means for a CEO and top management team to influence the governance, to reduce the influence of strategy influence. A stronger influence on the strategy is what's termed strategic opportunities. This is what occurs when the organization has capacity to redirect and reshape its strategy in order to utilize opportunities. This is, however, probably not possible to perform without the consent of the board, because it's a major action directly. It implies that the CEO needs to perform interactive governance in order to get the board to accept the strategic move. But as I said before about capital, if you have a high level of debt, free cash flow, no. I'm sorry, there is an error on my slide, and I put it there in order for you to understand that you understand what I'm saying, so you can see that that's an error on the slide. It says high level of debt. It means high level of equity, because high level of equity, free cash flow, makes the opportunity to perform strategic opportunities. That creates discretion. Structure is very often considered as a governance mechanism, but it is part of the governance since it can restrict the capacity of the CEO to act. But when we focus now, as we do here, on the management of governance, the CEO can use what could be called the divide and rule method. That is, to create a complex organizational structure that makes it very hard to find out what's going on in an organization. Of course, it is also very hard for the CEO to understand the organization if it's highly complex, but the CEO is always present in the corporation and have therefore a higher level of possibility to understand the organization. But it's very hard for a board of directors meeting 20 times a year to understand a complex organization. And if you cannot understand it, it's hard to monitor it, which reduce the capacity of the board. But if the corporation is listed on a stock market, there tend to be a price to pay on complexity, because a complex structure tends to be punished by the stock market by a lower share price. So maybe that is not really a good action to perform. Finally, when we go to the mechanisms that are really outside the ordinary corporate governance, that are in this environment of governance, that is mass media. Last but not the least is the mass media. Most media could be treated the same way as the stock market, by supplying a lot of managed information in order to make it possible for mass media to present the corporation in the way that the CEO would like it to be presented. But then a lot of engagement in mass media will give a high attention to the CEO, and that will reduce the possibility for the board to fire the CEO. It is harder to fire a CEO that has a great attention at the mass media and is considered to be very important. A high presence in mass media creates also high legitimacy for the organization, if it's well managed. This will make it harder for the board or the owner to try to change the organization in a dramatic way, because if it's presented, considered to be a very good organization with high legitimacy, it is really hard to change it, because there will be this pressure from the external environment. So good mass media management can create security and certainty for the organization, for the top management team, and for the CEO. So let's conclude. corporate management of governance. I am now giving my advices how to perform corporate management concerning the management of the governance mechanism in order to promote the interest of the CEO, the top management team, and the organization. While it sometimes can appear as being promoting inefficiency and to diverge from the responsibility of the managers, that is shareholder responsibility, it could at the same time also be considered to be actions by the top management to secure the organization and thereby supporting the organization's capacity to develop and to secure the top management team so they can perform their duties, not towards the shareholders, but towards the corporation. The notion that there is a conflict between the principal and the agent, between the shareholder and the managers, do not only contain a conflict about wealth distribution between the agent and the principal. There could also be a conflict that is substantial, that is concerning how the corporation should be developed. That is the material thing. What should be the strategy of the corporation? What should be the structure of the corporation? What should be done? That is the substantial part. While the agency theory assumes that the corporation is only a mean for the principal to gain wealth, it is also possible to consider a different perspective, where the organization is a constellation of interest, where those that we term agents and principals are only servants. They are only servants of the organization. That makes it possible for the organization to develop and to prosper. So here, the wealth of the principal is not the goal. It is the survival of the organization that is the goal, because it will give wealth and security for all those that are engaged in the corporation, which are all the different stakeholders, including shareholders and managers. If there is a constellation of interest carried by different parties, then there is not one single governance problem between the principal and agent, but there are as many governance problems as there are parties engaged in the corporation. In this case, my advice to the CEO and the top management team is giving ammunition to those that are considered to be those that should obey, so they have power to stand against those that demands others to obey their demands. If there are two very strong actors engaged in fighting against each other, that is of course very negative and consumes energy that could be given to the development of the corporation. But if these parties, due to more power balance, are engaged in discussions and negotiations in order to develop the cooperation and the corporation, then my suggested methods of gaining strength as a CEO and as a top management team could be very productive means in order to develop the cooperation and the corporation. My final words of advice or reflection is this. If you work at a corporation, if you are a director, or if you're an owner, a shareholder, a worker, you should think what your goal with the engagement is. Is it purely to give you wealth, to give you security, to give you discretion? Or do you have these individuals' goals while realizing that you and the others of the corporations are servants of the organization for its survival and success, and therefore for your goals to be successfully reached? So that was my presentation of the other way around of governance, how to manage corporate governance. Of course, as I said before, it is not really based on a very strong theory, because we haven't started to build theory about how to manage governance. But these are ideas. Now we come to the very end. We will meet one time live in a lecture free, but that is not really a lecture where I'm doing the lecturing. It is purely interactive. It is driven by you, by the students, not me. No. And in order to make it interactive, before we meet, you have to prepare. And at the meeting, you present 2 things. Questions about things from lecture 1 and 2. Something you did not understand, something that is not clear, just informational questions. Secondly, you prepare criticism about what has been said at lecture 1 and 2. Something that you find wrong, something that you find strange, something that is not really included but should have been included. That is to be critical. And then this is based on your our university, PUA's motto, sapere ore, dare to use your mind. And here now you have been following 2 lectures. Now use your mind, think out questions and criticism, and present it at the lecture 3. Of course, I would like to have lecture 3 not only interactive through internet, but I would like to be present at PUA, to walk in the corridors of PUA, to be present, because my impression of students when we are at site, when we are in the university, is that students have many clever questions that I cannot answer. I'm looking forward to have the opportunity. Unfortunately, this will be through the internet, but in the future, I'm looking forward to be present in the lecture room, to meet you, to be present in the corridor, and to sense all the energy that PUA have. And then afterwards, to go out, to go to the Lviv cafe and have the chocolate, just enjoy life. So see you in the interactive session. Stop sharing. Here I am, and that's it for this. Now, maybe you should repeat, look into these videos again, read these articles I sent to you, and then use your mind, make questions and criticism, and see you in the interactive section. Bye.